So in some church traditions, they have this thing they call call and response. You say something and you repeat it back, that whole thing. In our tradition, we call that liturgy. I say something or the leader says something and you respond with something. But more in the call response thing, I want you to join in with me today and have a little fun with this. It's an old call response. It begins, King Jesus is all. And what I want you to do is just repeat that. King Jesus is all. Ready? King Jesus is all. Okay, so when I get going on this, and we'll just keep for a few of those things. Ready? So King Jesus is all.
King Jesus is all.
My all in all.
My all in all.
I know he'll answer me.
I know he'll answer me.
When I call.
When I call.
Walking by my side.
Walking by my side.
I'm satisfied.
I'm satisfied.
King Jesus is all.
King Jesus is all.
My all in all.
My all in all.
Well, you guys did pretty darn good there. I'm impressed. Thank you. That's great. Well, our gospel today is a lot about this Jesus being a king. It was the charges put up against him by the religious leaders. And what's kind of unsaid in that is he's a king in rebellion to Rome. And so he's leading an insurrection, which is the worst, the gravest of crimes. And it's a crime sufficient enough to get him crucified, which was only left for these gravest and terriblest things you could do against Rome. So crucifixion is just this very narrow judgment of public awfulness, and that's what they're working on. They're wanting him to be labeled to be a king. And today in our modern world, we don't talk about kings. We don't think in terms of kings of the ancient world. But the kings of the ancient world that were authoritarians, they had all the power centralized in them. Everything flowed from them. And so we were then, the people were called subjects. So if you were subjects to the king, you were first subject to do whatever he told you to do. You didn't get a choice. If the king said, I need you to do this, you just did that. If he told you to do that, you were under his command completely. And the second thing they were subject to was the consequences of whatever decisions and actions he was taking out in the world. So when, so as people, you're really praying hard for your king to make good judgments, not be too stupid about things, and not cause you to have a lousy life and a lousy future. So that was a king. They had all this power. And so at the beginning of our country, some hundreds of years ago, almost 250 years ago now, they said, we need something different than this. We don't want to have no say, to be completely in the power of a king. So we'll do this thing called letting people have a vote. And then to break up the power of the king, we'll put in a judicial branch, an executive branch, legislative branch, and they'll have checks and balances. So this authoritarian thing isn't over us, and maybe it won't be so lousy as the last 1,000 years of history of these kings, some of which were pretty good, but a lot of which were very disappointing and sad in their existence. So that's the sense of king. And where I'm going with that is it puts in our DNA, if you will, of our country and our psyches kind of this anti-royal, anti-king sentiment. We don't want that. And yet, here we are singing King Jesus. You realize what you just said? That this one has authority over you, unquestioned authority over you, to command you to do what he wants, and that your future is really dependent on him making good decisions and coming through for you as this high authority. King Jesus. And he's my all. Anybody want to take that back right now? Hold it for a second. So let's look at what this conversation that Jesus had in our scriptures with Pilate. So he's having this conversation, and part of it a little bit before this was that Pilate is looking at Jesus thinking he doesn't hit me as an earthly king. he's picking up on that. In fact, he gets Jesus to say, my kingdom is not of this world. And Pilate has largely come to the conclusion that, in terms of an earthly king trying to usurp the power of Rome, that Jesus is not guilty. And that these charges are trumped up because they just want to get rid of this guy. And I'm a pawn in their little power play here. And so Pilate's come to that. But what he does is he knows he's a bit beholden, that these people underneath him can make his life a little miserable. And so he has Jesus whipped, and he puts a crown of thorns on his head, and on that whipped, bloodied back, he puts a robe, so it's a bloodied purple robe on him, and he leads them out, and he tells them, "Behold the man." And I think what he is showing them is this is no king. He's now a beaten, bloodied, pathetic figure. And all the strength and command power that you expect from an earthly king is not sitting there next to Pilate. And he's hoping this, if you will, satisfies their anger and their lust to have him destroyed, that this is enough. He's trying to talk him down from the whole crucifixion and where they're going with this. But of course it wasn't enough. What do? They cry out, "Crucify him, crucify him." And he says, "Well, you take him yourself. I find no charge against him here, that what you're saying." And they keep the pressure on. Finally, they give him this kind of veiled threat. They say, "Well, you are no friend of Caesar's if you release this man who sets himself up to be a king." I mean, surely Pilate doesn't want that rumor floating around that he has stepped down, that he's backed off. And so finally Pilate says, goes to the judgment seat. He sits there in this judgment seat, and he brings him out, and now he says, "Behold your king." Now he's poking back at him, right? Because now he is saying this beaten, bloodied, pathetic man standing before him is rightly fitting to be their king. And they don't like that idea. They don't like the idea that he's calling him their king, and that somehow Jesus is actually associated with them. No. And they go, away with him, crucify him. He says, "Shall I crucify your king?" And then they say that we have no king but Caesar. And he's hauled off. Well, for me, this whole story really is a story of earthly power and the dynamics of power. In the first place, of course, you have Pilate, a governor, under the very powerful Roman Empire with its very powerful military. So a great power there. In this gospel, Pilate just tells you, "I have the power to release you or crucify you. You talk to me here." And he has a lot of power. And Jesus says, "Well, you got that from above." But beside the point, he has a lot of power. And against that, he has the power of the numbers of the people he has to serve. They know they can make his life miserable and cause him trouble. And they have a power of wisdom of how to, if you will, pull the right strings and play the right cards so as to get Pilate and the system to do what they want him to do, and that is crucify Jesus. And in the midst of this, of course, here's Jesus, now beaten and bloodied, pathetic figure with a crown of thorns, dripping blood, with a bloody purple robe on him, looking all weak. In our world, we are enamored of power. You think what maybe one of the biggest things that's happening in our world today is this pursuit of artificial intelligence. And that's all about power. If we can get this intelligence that's way beyond what you and I or any other human can think, and it can get all this stuff done in the world, it can find cures for diseases, it can come up with new metals, new inventions, and it can guide our military in ways no one's ever thought about. It can outthink us all. If we have this kind of power, whoa, we can beat all our competitors, and we can be the top dog in this world. We don't even really know all its potentials or all its limits, but man, it's so enticing. We're spending trillions, whatever that is, of dollars to get this kind of power. I look across our world, and I think our world is often singing this king. Power is all. It's all about power. What I think the world misses in what Jesus is trying to show us is first that power has limits. Power is an earthly thing. I don't know about you, but we only get a few decades around here, and we're gone out of this earth. It's a temporary thing. So if this earth is all it is, you should be concerned about power first and foremost. That should be the big deal. Power should matter if this world's all it is. But wait a second. If there's a spiritual realm, a divine, eternal, holy realm, somehow infusing things and around things, it should catch our attention, because we're all going to walk out of, we're going to die, and that's it. Or is it? And if it isn't, we should listen to this guy and some of his wisdom, which are very counter power. Think of what he said here. Do not store up for yourselves treasures on earth where moth and rust and consume and thieves break. Instead, store up for yourselves treasures in heaven, in this eternal kingdom. Do what is going to matter for eternity. Don't get lost in what just matters here. That's what he's telling people. Power has limits, and power has some really negative downsides. One of the biggest downsides of power is that it ends up in cycles of conflict. So if I put you down, you put me down, I put you down, you put me down, and it escalates. That's the problem with power. It tends to escalate conflicts. I throw a bomb at you, you throw 2 bombs at me, and it's really hard to stop these cycles. We're just stuck back and forth. Our world history is just full of this stuff. Marriages are full of this stuff. Negative power cycles. And what does Jesus say? Remember that? He talked a lot about forgiveness, didn't he? And what does forgiveness do? It stops the cycle. It says, well, you put me down, I'm going to forgive you, and I'm not going to return fire. That's forgiveness. He's really talking about the downsides of power, saying it just consumes us. And too often it consumes the weakest and most vulnerable among us, which is another thing Jesus said that's just so shocking in the world of power. Blessed are the meek. Man, the meek are the roadkill on the ways of power. I mean, and yet Jesus is saying, blessed are they. How crazy is that? Or the servant of all is the greatest of all. Now, that's upside down, completely wrong. I mean, the Roman people must have thought he was nuts. Or how about, as you do unto the least of these, you do unto me. Again, all this inverse, upside down world that he's creating, saying it's different than you think. There's a spiritual realm infusing that. Tie into it. Hear what he's trying to tell you. What he's trying to do. So Pilate, I think the great irony of this is, of course, pulls Jesus out, this bloodied, beaten, pathetic figure, looks at the people and says, here, behold your king. Behold your king. And the truth is, they rejected it. He didn't believe it for a second either. But it's true. Here's our king. And what he shines with is the light and the call of God to love other people, even when it costs him, just as I was telling the children. He is going to walk the path even when it falls on him. Their anger, their bitterness, their deceit, their trumped up charges and all this other stuff. Here is a light of love. The shining in the darkness of power gone ugly. And here we are today reminding ourselves, and the light and the darkness will not overcome the light. That's what we're here today to say. And the darkness of this world, and it's churning and turning, it will not overcome the light. And that this king, beaten, bloody, pathetic figure, is still the king of that next world. And in weakness, his light shines, the love of God against the darkness of all the awfulness of the world. And so we still sing, maybe a little bit more somberly and reverently, King Jesus is all, my all in all.